This is a quick recap of the 3 rules for commas that will be on your upcoming quiz with a few practice sentences to see how you do. Rule number 1, commas separate items in a list of more than 2 things. If you have just 2 things, you don't need any commas. You can just use the and to separate those 2 things. Generally speaking, the comma before the final and is optional. You can put it in if you like. You can leave it out if you like. This is called the Oxford comma. So for example, down here in the first sentence, I have 3 items in my list. Metaphors, item number 2 is symbols, item number 3, allegories. I have more than 2, so I know that I'm going to have a comma somewhere. This comma between metaphors and similes is absolutely required, and that's there to tell my reader that these 2 nouns are separate things. It's not a typo, I didn't forget a possessive apostrophe. These are 2 separate nouns. This one over here, before the final and, is optional. You can leave it out if you like because you don't have any special considerations. There's no misreading that's going to happen. Or you can put it in. If you like it, you can put it in. Oops, sorry, comma. And if you don't like it, you can leave it out. On the quiz, that will not count one way or the other. You won't get a point if you put it in, and you won't lose a point if you omit it. But the comma between the first 2 items in the list is essential. There is one time when this comma here before the final and is optional, and that's when one of the items in the list has its own and. And our goal then is to use the comma before the final and to prevent misreadings. So down here we can see we have item number 1 in the list, metaphors and similes, item number 2, allegories, item number 3, personification. Because metaphors and similes are 2 very similar parts of speech, I want my reader to know that I want them to take this as item number 1. Metaphors and similes, think of that as one thing. Then allegory is going to be number 2, and personification is going to be number 3. Since item number 1 has an and in it, I don't want my reader to get confused with this and this and. It seems like there are too many. So that means I have to put the final comma in. The comma that comes before the final and is not optional. You have to put it in there so that your reader can understand the role of the 2 ands. And finally, the items in the list can be anything. In these example sentences, they're nouns, but they can be anything. Adjectives, they can be long phrases, they can be verbs, anything. As long as they constitute a list, then this rule will come into play. Rule number 2 is commas that separate 2 full sentences joined by a conjunction, the 4 conjunctions and, but, or nor. The first example here where you have no comma, if you look on, so here's the but. Just because you have a but in a sentence doesn't mean you're going to put a comma in front of it. You have to look on both sides of it. So let me look on the left side first. I should have a full sentence on the left side since it's the start of the sentence. And I do. I have we, subject, I've studied, verb, good. Full sentence on the left-hand side. If I'm going to put a comma in before the but, I have to have a full sentence on the right-hand side. So if I look at the right-hand side of the but, I can see I don't have a full sentence. I don't have a verb, I don't have a subject, I just have a negating word not and another noun that is the direct object of the sentence. So since I don't have a subject and a verb on the right side of the but, then I can't put a comma in here. And the purpose then is to tell my reader, don't think you're getting another sentence on the other side. I'm just negating the thing that came before it. Don't expect a full sentence. In this sentence down here where a comma is required, I have 2 full sentences on either side. So again, just because there's a but in the sentence doesn't mean you're going to have a comma. You have to check. So first, check on this side. We studied poetry. Subject, we, studied, verb, good. Then, to see if you need a comma, look on the other side. There's the we, there's the read, subject, and a verb. So that means before the but, I have to put the comma in. And the purpose is not just there to annoy you, it's there to tell the reader, hey, I'm done with the full sentence that was on the left-hand side of this conjunction. And what's coming up next is another full sentence. In this sentence, we had the subject on either side of the but is the same one. We over here, but it doesn't have to be. As long as it is a subject with its own verb, you're going to put the comma in. So down here, we have we studied poetry. Here's my subject, here's my verb, check. On the left-hand side of the but, I have a full sentence. To check if I need a comma at all, I just got to look on the other side. Here's my subject, teacher. Here's my verb, cover, check. I have a subject and a verb on either side, on the right-hand side of the but, and that means I need to put a comma in. Again, that's to tell my reader there is another full sentence coming up after the contrasting conjunction. But in this example, we have different subjects. We on the left-hand side, teacher on the right-hand side, it doesn't make any difference. As long as you have a subject and a verb on either side of those four conjunctions, you will put in a comma. Rule number 3, commas that are used to separate two consecutive adjectives, that is, adjectives that come right next to each other, that describe the same noun. So in English, almost always you have your adjectives in front of your noun. So if I've got my noun over here, customer, and I've got two adjectives that precede it, which is where they almost always go in English, and I've got two of them right in a row, the point of the comma is to keep my reader from misunderstanding what's coming up. Dogmatic is an adjective, unreasonable is an adjective. But when my reader gets to dogmatic and they think adjective, they expect that a noun is going to follow, but it doesn't. It's another adjective. So to avoid misreading and a reader saying, I don't know what's going on, we put the comma in to say a little break here. We've got one adjective, then we've got another one, and both of them are going to be modifying the noun that finally follows. If I wanted, I could take out the comma and I could put in and. Now I really just have two items in a list. No comma, I just have two adjectives. Dogmatic is one thing in the list, unreasonable is my other thing. And then I don't need a comma. The dogmatic and unreasonable customer refused to accept the manager's attempts to deal with his refund. If I don't want that and in there, I can take it out. Two consecutive adjectives modifying the same noun, they have to be separated by an adjective. Down here, because of the extremely hot, unseasonably humid conditions during the match, neither competitor played at her highest level. So here I have my noun, over here, conditions, and I have adjectives that come in front. I have hot conditions and I have humid conditions. I also have adverbs that go in front of them, but that doesn't matter. As long as I have two adjectives, it doesn't matter if there are other words in there. So here's adjective number 1, here's adjective number 2. I've got to put a comma in between them so that my reader doesn't expect a noun to follow hot, which is what they would expect. And again, I could take it out if I wanted. I could put in an and. Because of the extremely hot and unseasonably humid conditions during the match, then I don't need any comma, but if I don't want to put the and in there, I have to put the comma in. This comma down here we haven't covered yet. This will be coming up next. Why do we have a comma here? It's because we have a dependent clause that starts the sentence. But this one's not covered by our 3 rules, so I would not ask you to put that in on the quiz. Okay, so now we've covered the 3 rules. Again, here are a few practice sentences to see if you can put in your correct commas. Stop the recording for a second, put them in, and then start it back up again and see if you get them right. Sentence number 1. We could not understand the presenter's word choice, accent, or humor, but we did like the slideshow. So first, the easiest one is I can see that there's a but. Just because there's a but doesn't mean that I have to have a comma. So I can check here. I have a we on this side, understand. Good. Full sentence on one side. Check the other side. We, like, did like, verb on the other side, subject on the other side. That means I have to put a comma in right there. The but is separating 2 full sentences. The comma is required. The other thing I have here is a list. We did not understand, and then there were 3 things we did not understand. The word choice. Here's item number 1, word and choice. Here's item number 2, accent. Item number 3, humor. This comma after word choice is absolutely required. It's separating item number 1, word choice. It's the first thing in there, sorry. Second thing is accent. I have to put that comma in to separate it. If you want, you can put a comma in here before the conjunction that separates the items in the list. You can leave it out. I think here's where you probably would want to leave it out since you have a comma that follows right soon after, kind of getting a little bit messy. In this one, I was intrigued by the presenter's accent, but put off by strange word choice. Here's a but just because there's a but in the sentence doesn't mean there's a comma. Check on either side. I have a subject over here, I, and I have a verb was. Right, just like I'd expect, on the left-hand side of the conjunction, there's a full sentence. Check the other side. Put off by, this is an adjective phrase. I don't have a subject, I don't have a verb, and that means I cannot put a comma before the but. That way my reader knows not to expect another full sentence on the other side of the but. Third one, the presenter's baffling extreme accent and his strange humor left us confused about his main point, the value of presentation to us, and the connection between his words and the images on the slideshow. So the presenter's baffling extreme accent. Here's my noun. Here's an adjective that's modifying extreme accent. Here's another one that's modifying accent, baffling. That means I have two adjectives right next to each other. I have to put a comma in. If I don't like the comma, I could take it out and put in an and, but it's a really long sentence already. I've already got another and coming up. Best not to do that. Leave the adjectives as they are, put in the comma separating the two full two adjectives modifying the same noun. Okay, and then the other thing I have is a second item in a list. What are the things that left us confused? His accent and his strange humor. But there are only two things in the list, so I don't need to put a comma in front of the and. I don't have more than two things, just two things, so I don't need that. They left us confused about, and then I have a list of things that we were confused about. The first thing we were confused about was his main point. That's item number 1. Item number 2, the value of the presentation services to us. And then finally, the connection between his words and the images on the slideshow. That's item number 3. So this first one's easy, the main point. Here's my first item in the list, his main point. So I got to put a comma in there to separate it from number 2. The value of the presentation to us. And now I've got my and, introducing my final element in the list. Normally, this thing would be optional. I could put the comma in, I could leave it out, and it wouldn't matter. But in this case, it isn't optional. I have to put that comma in. And that's because the item, number 3, the final item in the list, has an and in it, right over here. I don't want my reader confused with all these ands going on, especially if I maybe had put one up here with between baffling and extreme. I've got to control the meaning. I want my reader to know that this is an item in the list and not the final thing coming up. So this comma before that final and is required.